Autumn in Boston is beautiful. As the maple trees on Maple Street turned crimson, Linda Johnson was rushing up the stairs of a small antiquarian bookstore called Bookhaven. Professor Jones's first edition has arrived. Linda called out to Martha, the shop owner. Martha smiled over her glasses and said, "Thanks to you, another valuable piece will be added to his collection." Later that evening, Linda received a call from her father, Walter. "Linda, can you come over this Sunday?" His voice carried its usual warmth. "Of course, Dad. Is there anything I can help with?" "No, I just want to see you. Your mother and sister have been so busy lately, we hardly have time to talk." On Sunday, Linda headed to the Johnson family home in the suburbs. As she arrived at the entrance, her sister Vanessa was stepping out of a luxury car. Wearing designer sunglasses and dressed in the latest fashion, Vanessa gave her sister a casual wave. "It's been a while. Isn't that outfit from last season?" Linda looked down at her modest clothes and smiled. "You look well." The door was opened by her mother, Helen. "Oh, Linda. What a surprise." A cold gaze swept over Linda. "Vanessa, tell me about your dinner party. That celebrity couple came, didn't they?" Linda quietly entered the house. Her mother and sister's conversation had completely left her behind. Spotting her father in the kitchen, Linda headed directly there. Walter turned around from his cooking and immediately smiled when he saw his daughter. "Linda. You came." He wiped his hands and hugged his daughter. "Tell me what you've been up to lately." The two talked quietly in the kitchen. Linda enthusiastically spoke about happenings at the bookstore and books she had read, while her father listened intently. Occasionally, loud laughter from her mother and sister drifted in from the living room. "I bought that new Gucci bag last week. James gave it to me as a surprise," Vanessa's voice echoed. During dinner, the conversation centered around Vanessa's luxurious lifestyle and her husband James's success stories. Helen was proud of her daughter's achievements. Occasionally, she would direct questions at Linda, but these were merely superficial courtesies. "Linda, isn't it time you thought about your future? Do you plan to spend your whole life in that bookstore?" Before Linda could answer, Walter quietly intervened. "I'm proud of Linda for pursuing her passion. Money isn't the only measure of success." Helen gave her husband a cold look but said nothing. After dinner, Walter invited Linda to his study. The room's walls were filled with books and bathed in warm light. "Take this," Walter handed his daughter an old leather notebook. "I've been jotting down my thoughts and ideas in it. You'll surely find value in it." Linda accepted it gratefully. "Dad, how are you feeling? You look a bit tired." Walter smiled. "Can't beat old age. But don't worry. I've lived a fulfilling life." As she was leaving, Linda tried to say to her mother and sister, but they were too absorbed in planning a shopping trip to notice her presence. Only Walter saw her to the door. "Linda, you're truly a special daughter. Never lose sight of who you are." Feeling an unusual weight in her father's words, Linda headed home. The sound of a ringing phone pulled Linda from the darkness of midnight. Reaching out from her sleep, she answered the phone. Her mother Helen's voice was cold and emotionless. "Linda, your father has passed away. They say it was a heart attack. Come to the hospital right away." A sense of the world collapsing. Linda felt frozen, unable to move. Walter Johnson had left this world without a chance for her to say. Upon arriving at the hospital, Vanessa was already in tears. Her mother was having a businesslike conversation with the doctor. Linda was quietly led to her father, where she touched his cold hand. The hand that had always been warm would never comfort her again. "Dad." The words caught in her throat. The face of her father, who had smiled and seen her off just days ago, now looked as if he was in peaceful sleep. The next morning, discussions about funeral arrangements began. When Linda made suggestions, her mother coldly interrupted. "We don't need your ideas. Vanessa and I will decide. You just organize your father's papers and receipts." Linda nodded silently. Entering her father's study, his presence still seemed to fill the room. The old leather chair, a book left open, his glasses. Everything reminded her of him. While organizing his papers, she remembered the leather notebook her father had given her. It was now the only precious bond connecting her to her father. On the day of the funeral, more people attended than expected. Linda was surrounded by unfamiliar faces. Men in suits spoke solemnly to her mother and Vanessa. An elderly man with white hair approached Linda. "You must be Linda. I heard a lot about you from your father." "Excuse me, who are you?" "Michael Clark. I was your father's friend and his lawyer." He smiled gently. "Walter was always proud of you." As the ceremony began, strangers stood up one after another to give speeches honoring her father. A pioneer in the technology industry, a warm friend, a compassionate leader. Linda saw sides of her father she hadn't known. A man who claimed to be her father's colleague said, "Without Walter's foresight, our company would not have achieved the success it has today." Linda was confused. She had thought her father was just an ordinary office worker. After the ceremony, some people remained. Michael took out some documents. "I will now read Walter Johnson's will." According to the will, most of Walter's assets would go to Helen, with the remainder to Vanessa. Linda's name never appeared. Tension filled the room. Michael gave Linda an apologetic look but said nothing. After the document was read, Helen suddenly stood up and declared to Linda, her face wearing a satisfied smile. "You received nothing from the inheritance. Get out of this house." Linda was speechless with shock. She couldn't believe her father would exclude her from his estate. Vanessa also stood up and said mockingly, "This is the will. Nothing for big sister. Too bad, loser." People in the room exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one intervened. Only Michael looked at Linda with concern. Linda slowly rose to her feet. She held back her tears, but her body was trembling. The grief of losing her father, plus this humiliation. Yet, she held her head high. "Dad taught me more than just about money. That's enough for me." Linda left quietly without arguing. Behind her, she could hear her mother and sister excitedly discussing, "Let's sell that house and go on a European trip," Vanessa's voice said. The sky was gray, and rain was beginning to fall. Walking slowly, Linda reflected on memories with her father. His teachings, his smile, and the leather notebook he had given her last. Even without an inheritance, her father's love lived on within her. Back at her apartment, Linda sat by the window, listening to the rain while looking at her father's photograph. "Dad, why?" Questions she couldn't articulate pierced her heart. But more than anger or resentment, deep sadness and loneliness enveloped her. She gently opened her father's leather notebook. Inside were words written in his handwriting. "True wealth is the memories that remain in the hearts of those we love." Linda quietly shed tears. While moving between the bookshelves at Bookhaven, Linda unconsciously repeated the same actions. Rearranging books, dusting them off, adjusting covers. She immersed herself in routine work, trying to escape the pain in her heart. "Linda, why don't you take a break?" Martha asked worriedly. "You've been working nonstop for 3 weeks." Linda smiled weakly. "I'm fine. I want to stay busy." 3 weeks after her father's death. The grief had become a dull pain, taking up residence within Linda. At night, The quietness of her apartment attacked her, making her acutely aware of her father's absence. Financially, things were getting tighter. Her apartment rent had increased, and the bookstore salary alone wasn't providing much leeway. That night, her smartphone notification sounded. A photo posted by her mother and Vanessa on social media. The two were at a French resort, raising champagne glasses. It was tagged with #NewLife #splurging on Dad's inheritance. Linda put down her smartphone and gazed out the window. The night view of Boston spread out quietly. She picked up her father's photo and softly asked, "Why did you exclude me from the inheritance, Dad? Did I do something wrong?" There was no answer. Only her father's gentle smile looked back at her from the photograph. Linda opened the leather notebook and reread her father's words. Though encouraged by his words, questions remained in her heart. Why did her father claim to be an ordinary office worker when so many businessmen appeared at his funeral? As morning light streamed in, there was a knock at the door. When Linda opened it, her mother Helen and sister Vanessa were standing there. Their expressions were stern, hardly looking like they had just returned from a European trip. "May we come in?" Helen commanded. Linda silently ushered them inside. Vanessa sniffed and looked around at the modest interior of the apartment. Such a simple lifestyle. Given Dad's station, you could have lived more luxuriously. Linda asked while making coffee, "What brings you here?" Helen said imperiously, "Hand over everything of your father's. It's all part of the inheritance." "Yes, all the documents and diaries too," Vanessa added. "There might be some valuable information hidden." Linda quietly replied, "The mementos Dad gave me are my precious treasures. There's something money can't buy." Helen's face twisted with anger. "You have no right. Legally, everything belongs to Vanessa and me." The two began rummaging through the apartment. Vanessa opened the closet, and Helen searched the drawers. Linda stood frozen, unable to find words to protest this invasion. "Found it." Vanessa discovered her father's old watch and picked it up. "This is an antique Rolex. It's quite valuable." Helen also found her father's photo frame and put it in her bag. "I'll take this too." Linda watched their looting with tears in her eyes. However, the leather notebook from her father had been hidden in the back of a bookshelf the night before, out of intuition. At least that was safe. After they left, the apartment looked ransacked. Linda quietly sat on the floor, covering her face with her hands. Most of her father's keepsakes had been taken. All that remained were the memories in her heart and the hidden leather notebook. A few days later, Linda was flipping through her father's notebook during her break. Many pages contained philosophical words and life lessons. That day, however, she discovered a page she had previously overlooked. It was filled with numbers and abbreviations. Below was a small mark like a fingerprint. Though incomprehensible to Linda, she felt that something important was hidden. On Friday evening, a month after the funeral, when Linda returned to her apartment, a stranger was standing at the entrance. Looking closer, it was Michael Clark, the lawyer she had met once at the funeral. "Ms. Johnson, do you have a moment?" Surprised, Linda invited him into her apartment. Michael carried a briefcase and had a serious expression. "I apologize for the delayed contact. It took time to prepare." "Prepare what?" Linda was confused. Michael said quietly, "Actually, your father left something only for you." Linda stared at him in disbelief. "But my name wasn't in the will." "That was the official will." However, Walter had made other arrangements, Michael said sincerely. "I have kept your father's secret for a long time. Now is the time to tell you the truth." He opened his briefcase and took out an envelope. "Please read this." With trembling hands, Linda opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in her father's handwriting. Dear Linda, if you are reading this letter, I am no longer in this world. First, I must apologize. I left without revealing many truths. Though I lived outwardly as an ordinary salaried man, 20 years ago, I co-founded Innovation X with a friend. We developed innovative technologies and achieved success. But I didn't want my family to love me for money. Especially considering your mother and sister's materialistic tendencies, I feared revealing the truth would distort family bonds. But you were different. You always approached people with a pure heart, valuing spiritual richness over material values. So to you alone, I entrust my true legacy. Michael will explain the details. Much of my stock is yours. Use it for good purposes. One last thing. The leather notebook I gave you contains important information. Look at the inside of the spine. With love. Large tears fell from Linda's face as she finished reading the letter. They were not tears of sadness, but of confusion and relief. If this letter is true, then Dad trusted me. Michael nodded quietly. Walter loved you deeply. And he believed you were the right person to carry on his legacy. Linda immediately took out the leather notebook and examined the inside of the spine. There was a small piece of paper attached. A sequence of letters and numbers like a code. This is the beginning of your new life, Michael smiled. I'll talk to you officially tomorrow. The Board of Innovation X wants to meet you. As the morning sun began to gently illuminate the streets of Boston, Linda was getting into Michael Clark's car. She had questioned several times if the previous night had been a dream. Her father's letter, the hidden truth, and the potential inheritance that could change her life. Everything felt surreal. Are you nervous? Michael asked calmly while driving. Yes, a little, Linda replied, gazing out the window. I still don't understand who my father really was. Michael smiled. Walter was a wonderful person. He preferred to stay behind the scenes and supported many people. And above all, he loved his family. The car entered Boston's financial district and stopped in front of a skyscraper. A silver plaque inscribed with Innovation X headquarters was at the entrance. While ascending to the upper floors in the elevator, Linda's heart was pounding. When the doors opened, a spacious executive floor appeared. Several men and women were waiting for her arrival in the central conference room. Everyone, this is Walter Johnson's eldest daughter, Linda Johnson, Michael introduced. A white-haired woman stood up and approached Linda. I'm Eleanor Fisher. I've been Walter's partner since the company's founding. It's an honor to meet you. The conference room was filled with her father's colleagues. They stood up one after another, sharing memories of her father and his achievements. Innovation X was an innovative company combining artificial intelligence and environmental technology. It had brought about transformations in various fields such as healthcare, agriculture, and energy and continued to grow. Now, let's get to the main point. Michael took out documents from his briefcase. This is the official secret will. Walter Johnson left 30% of Innovation X's shares to Linda. At current market value, it's worth approximately $400 million. The room fell silent. Linda caught her breath. $400 million. The number danced in her head. Is this real? Eleanor smiled gently. Yes, without a doubt. Walter trusted you deeply. He often said, Linda will use it correctly. Michael continued, Walter distributed the remaining shares to charities and employees. His wish was for the company to continue developing technologies that benefit people. But why in the official will? There were two reasons, Michael explained with a serious expression. First, Walter didn't want the family to know about this company. He feared money would distort family relationships. Especially, he was concerned about Helen and Vanessa's materialistic tendencies. Linda listened silently. She understood her father's thinking. She knew well that her mother and sister had personalities that clung to money. The second reason was to protect you, Eleanor said. A sudden fortune complicates life. Walter wanted to give you time until you were mentally prepared. Afterward, Linda was given a tour of the company. Cutting-edge research facilities, dedicated employees, and an environment where her father's will lived on. Everything was fresh to her. Back at the office, Michael encouraged her to take out the leather notebook. Let's decode the cipher on the paper in the spine. When Linda handed over the paper, Michael entered the code into a tablet. The screen immediately displayed a sequence of numbers and a map. This is a record of Walter's personal investments. Besides Innovation X, he invested in many promising startup companies. He particularly focused on supporting young entrepreneurs. Eleanor added, Walter was passionate about nurturing the next generation of innovators. This investment portfolio is also yours. Linda was stunned. Am I to take over all of this? You have options, Michael said gently. You can sell everything and return to private life. However, Walter hoped that you would continue his legacy. Eleanor took Linda's hand. You don't need to feel pressured. You have talent. Walter saw that in you. Linda laughed involuntarily. Dad told me I didn't have business talent. That was only in front of the family, Michael explained. Actually, he highly valued your work at the antiquarian bookstore and how you built trust with customers. The ability to see essence and empathize with people's hearts is more valuable than any business skill. Tears streamed down Linda's cheeks. The fact that she had been acknowledged warmed her heart. Take time to think, Eleanor said kindly. Today, just absorbing the information is enough. That evening, Linda was rereading her father's letter multiple times. The words, "To you alone, I entrust my true legacy," were deeply engraved in her heart. The next day, Linda made her decision. She called Michael and expressed her intention to join Innovation X's board of directors. I will continue my father's legacy. But in my own way. A week later, Linda was explaining her vision to Michael and Eleanor. I want to start a project using Innovation X's AI technology to reduce educational disparities. Also, an initiative to provide environmental technology to small-scale farmers. Eleanor nodded with satisfaction. That's exactly Walter's philosophy. Michael said while reviewing documents, the board unanimously supports you taking leadership. Linda still didn't have a sense of reality. Until a month ago, she had been working at a small bookstore, worrying about paying rent. And now, she had become a major shareholder of a company with enormous wealth and influence. Am I really the right person for this? Linda couldn't hide her anxiety. You are perfect, Eleanor smiled. Walter always said, Linda's kindness and sincerity are the best legacy I can leave to this world. Linda gazed at the Boston skyline stretching outside the window. A future full of possibilities spread before her. She placed her father's photo on the desk and smiled gently at it. Dad, I will certainly carry on your legacy. But I wish you had told me a little sooner. Warm laughter echoed in the room. From the midst of sadness, a new hope was sprouting. In the spring sunshine that brightly illuminated the square of the Boston Public Library, the establishment ceremony for the Johnson Education Foundation was taking place. Linda stood at the podium, looking at the gathered people. I want to use the legacy my father left for a better future. This foundation will provide quality educational opportunities for economically disadvantaged children and support innovative ideas from young entrepreneurs. The participants responded with warm applause. In the front row of the ceremony were Innovation X directors, Michael, and old friends of her father. Linda's life had completely changed over the past 6 months. Although she had quit her bookstore job, she had newly acquired a chain of small local bookstores and started developing a new model that fused digital technology with the traditional reading experience. After the ceremony, Linda returned to her office. From her room on the top floor of the skyscraper, she had a panoramic view of Boston Bay. On her desk was her father's photo, and by the window, the leather notebook she had inherited from her father was framed. The phone rang. "Linda, did you see the news?" It was Michael's voice. When she turned on the television, a feature about her was being broadcast. From unknown bookstore clerk to millionaire overnight, Linda Johnson, the new face of Innovation X. The feature reported on her charitable activities and that Innovation X's stock price had reached an all-time high. Linda watched it with mixed feelings. The next morning, her smartphone rang. The display showed "Mother." Linda took a deep breath before answering. "Linda, it was you." Helen's voice was sweet and flattering. "Why didn't you tell us? We're family." "Mom, how are you?" Linda responded calmly. "Well, fine, actually, I'm in a bit of trouble." Helen lowered her tone. "The inheritance has almost run out." Later, there was also a call from Vanessa. "Sis, we're blood sisters, right? Shouldn't we help each other?" Linda didn't answer. A week later, her mother and sister appeared at her office. Anxiety was visible on their faces. It seemed they had already lost their luxury cars and mansions. "I'll lodge a legal objection," Helen threatened. "You stole our inheritance." Michael responded calmly, "Everything is legally sound. Rather, we could demand the return of the keepsakes that you arbitrarily took from Linda." The two fell silent. Linda quietly stood up. "Mom, Vanessa," she said gently. "I didn't resent my father. I don't intend to resent you either. But isn't family about respecting and caring for each other?" A year later, Linda's foundation had grown significantly. One day, she visited the foundation's community center. There, she witnessed an unexpected sight. Vanessa was reading to children. "Sis," Vanessa said bashfully. "The job you offered with conditions. I was reluctant at first, but I've started to enjoy spending time with the children." Helen had also begun volunteering in a program for the elderly. The arrogance of the past was no longer visible in her expression. That night, Linda stood on a terrace overlooking Boston Bay. She opened her father's leather notebook and looked at the last page. "True success is measured not by wealth, but by how much positive influence you've had on people's lives." Linda smiled. "I understand, Dad. I will always cherish your teachings." The gentle spring breeze caressed her hair. It was as if her father was blessing her new life.